What the Tech is sponsored by Hover.com. Domain names made simple. Go to gfq.hover.com and get 10% off your entire purchase. And by Stitcher Radio. Listen on the go via the Stitcher mobile app. For more information, go to stitcher.com/GFQ. Welcome, everybody, to What the Tech. I am Andrew Zarian on this very special Thursday episode of What the Tech. Normally, we record live on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., but we had a little scheduling change. I moved my show. Paul had a speaking engagement that he had to attend because he's a very important and busy person, so we decided we're going to do the show on Thursday.
Well...
How was that speaking engagement,
Paul?
I
didn't speak. I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't explain this correctly. I went to
maybe I'm making it up.
A Windows 8 developer event. Actually, they wanted me to speak, but I didn't want to speak. I just wanted to listen. So I learned about Windows 8 software development.
You know what I'm learning? That wireless mice are not that reliable.
Yeah. You know, I did something dumb with it. I don't like wireless anything, because I don't like replacing batteries. But the wireless mouse I use, which is that Microsoft one, the IntelliMouse Explorer, the big one, the track one, love it, right? I love it so much I have multiple copies of it. And for 6 months, I've been wondering what the hell was going on with this thing. Like I moved the transceiver around. I'm like, why is this thing working so poorly? You know why? Because I used two of them right next to each other. Yeah. So clearly they're fighting each other. It took me like 6 months to figure that out.
I don't know what's going on here because I have this this Logitech and I'm changing the battery almost every week now.
Yeah.
And I can't figure out what the hell's going on, but Paul's a bit low, so I will up Paul. So this is what we're doing today. Before we continue, we don't have. We have some show notes, but not
by the
really.
Way, by the standards of your show notes, I have to say these are
awful,
particularly bad. Yeah.
And the reason why they're bad, and I'll tell you why. I wasn't too crazy about the tech news for the week. 2, it's a drinking show, so I'm sure we're gonna abandon all tech talk 15 minutes into the show and just talk about World War II.
Sure.
We are drinking, and the reason why we're drinking is because Paul's done with his book.
Yes.
And you've been done with your book for a couple weeks now, right?
I wish I could. Yeah. I mean, done is a kind of a relative term. Obviously, I have a lot more work to do, but I did finish the first, the major, the main writing phase of the book. Yeah.
How does that now? What's the process like? Because I'm always interested.
Well, now,
in this.
So we wrote most of that to the consumer preview, which is the version Microsoft shipped publicly back in February. Wiley, the publisher, puts it together and looks at it and says, okay, based on what you've written and based on the number of screenshots you have provided us, this book is going to be X number of pages long, and it needs to be this number of pages long. Mm-hmm. And you would think usually the big writing problem that one has is that you don't have enough pages.
Yes, now you have too many.
I have too many, yeah. So I already cut some stuff out. The problem is now that the release preview is coming, we're going to be adding a lot of stuff because every one of those apps is changing. The bundled apps, some of them fairly dramatically. So I'm going to have to cut stuff. I mean, we already cut a couple of chapters. I cut a big chunk of the IE chapter already.
I mean, now with the latest news that we were discussing how Arrows is no longer in Windows. Mm-hmm. Does that affect your book?
Yeah, in 2 ways. I mean, we knew that we would not be doing the final screenshots until late in the game, as late as possible, right? Release preview at the earliest. So we did actually take screenshots of everything. All of the screenshots we call for in the book are taken. Virtually actually, I should say, literally all of them will be replaced. But I thought once the release preview came out, I would be able to start shipping final versions of the shots that had to do with the Explorer environment, like the desktop, right? Storage spaces, file history, I mean, all that stuff. And now that stuff's changing again, I'm going to have to wait. I mean, there's no point in updating the shots because they're going to have to update again. There's no way to approximate what that thing's going to look like with the current UI.
So those images that we've seen, they're not actually the non-Aero windows that we've seen online. I think I saw a couple images, and it's just this plain white, border.
Yeah. So Microsoft, it's funny. Obviously, they're moving to Metro, but they have this other environment, the desktop, that they still want to update. They still have to update. The next version of Microsoft Office is going to come out. It's a desktop suite of applications. The next version of Visual Studio is going to come out. It is also a desktop suite of applications. And there's more, beside that. So those two applications in particular are picking up something that some people have described as like a Metro-like UI that is white, that uses a lot of white space, that has, capitalized menu items.
And I like that. That looks nice to me. I mean,
it does grow on you. And I have to say, I look at the screenshot they provided of what Explorer is going to look like, and I don't actually think it looks that good. But having used Office 15, actually, I have to say, it does grow on you. So maybe it will be okay.
Paul mocks me for this, even off the air. It's not just on the air. Paul mocks me off the air on a regular basis. He'll literally call me and just mock me, and mock me because I use a Mac, and the way I use Windows is equivalent to how people use Windows in 1995. I do Fdisk. I'll format every 6 months. I'll turn off services. And Paul thinks I'm out of my mind when I tell him that I turn off the fax and I turn off printing. I disable it. I don't even put it on manual. I totally disable printing. I don't have a printer connected.
Sure.
I don't think the last time I printed on a Windows machine has to be maybe 5-6 years ago.
It still works.
Does it? Does printing still exist?
Yes, it does.
Is it as good as it was 5 or 6 years ago?
Yeah. You still have to do some of the same silly stuff. I print from time to time. I buy stuff at Best Buy and they send me coupons and I print those. I know my wife prints a lot. We have this fairly heavy duty printer that's going fairly frequently, but it's usually not me.
I got really upset one time, and this is not a joke. I took my printer and I threw it out the window.
Yeah.
I was getting ready to replace it.
Like an office space thing?
Yeah, almost like that. I have a window right in my office here. I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is a window. And the printer that I had, it was a Lexmark.
Right.
And the thing wouldn't print. It would just jam up every time. So I unplugged it and just threw it out of the window. And that was it. Didn't even say a word. My wife just looked at me and understood what I was going through.
Yeah.
I'm not slurring. I bit my tongue earlier. People are saying I'm already slurring. I literally bit my tongue 20 minutes before starting the show, and I can't say certain words now.
I intend to be slurring by the time.
No, I'll be. Listen, I'm hoping to start slurring. By
what
the
do
end
you
of the
drink? What is this woman's drink you're drinking though?
A Budweiser?
Oh, okay. It looked like a Chardonnay or something.
No, I don't have my Pinot Grigio this week.
Okay.
I'm like a New York housewife. I sit there and I drink Chardonnay and Pinot Grigio at 11 o'clock in the morning. No, I have Budweiser, but I'm putting it in a glass to be classy for the show.
I see.
I am. I've been told that it's classier to put your beer in a glass.
I disagree.
You disagree. See, I have more. I'll show you guys on camera. I have more here, but I'm drinking out of the glass because I feel I need to with the show. Paul's a very classy dude.
we freeze mugs in the freezer.
Do you?
Yeah.
I have never done that, and I should. So I'm excited to see the new layout of it. I was never a fan of Aero, but we were discussing off the air right before we started that it actually uses less CPU resources, according to Microsoft, because it relies on the GPU and not the CPU. And I did not know that.
Right. No, but on the flip
side. But I feel
side,
dumb. Like, is this something that's known? Like, I should know this.
So, yeah, I thought it was pretty well known. I mean, here's my problem. This is just the way my brain works. I sort of had to remind myself that was the case. In other words, this was probably a news story back in 2005 or 2006 or something. I just don't remember. In other words, this kind of came and went. They explained why they were doing it and why it was better, and then they released Windows Vista, and then they released Windows 7, and of course they actually tuned it down in Windows 8, not for the hit on the processor. Well, actually, maybe it is related to the hit on the processor, but primarily for battery life, and that's the reason they're getting rid of it in Windows 8 is because it adversely affects the battery. It's probably a very small percentage, but they're very concerned about battery life.
And they should be. I mean, in my opinion, I think they really should be because this is going to be a mobile
Yeah.
I mean, they say
No, it
it's
is.
for
No,
the
you're
desktop,
right.
but it's
You're
a
right.
mobile operating system. Most people are going to be running this on a tablet or a laptop.
Yeah, by the way, there's a reason that smartphones typically only display one thing at a time, and it's not just because the screen's small. It's because once you start doing multiple things at one time, the processor blows away the battery life. And smartphone OSs and Windows 8 as well, automatically put things to sleep in the background. They tombstone them, they kill them automatically, and so forth. And that's all done a little bit for RAM, of course. These things have fewer resources, but a big part of it is for the power management. And
Yeah.
Windows 8 works the same way. And the problem with the desktop is you can't control how many windows people have open and all that kind of stuff. So.
You have a really good blog on your website that I was reading before we went on the air. While you were doing Windows Weekly, I was on the website, and it's comparing Mountain Lion to Windows 8. And
Right.
it's an interesting comparison, because if this comparison was done a couple of years ago when Windows 7 came out and it was Leopard, everybody was saying how the operating systems are very similar. I mean, they look different, but they function in a very similar way. But your overall reaction is that they are totally different now.
Yeah. Although, it's funny that they both have the same pieces. Like if you want to look at individual things, they do. They have messaging apps. They have, a way to share data and so forth. They do the same things, but the approach that Microsoft is taking is completely different from that of Apple. And it's very debatable which is better or whether they both have any value. I mean, Apple has decided that the best parts of iOS will come into Mac OS 10, not feature, by feature, but the parts that make sense, which I think is a great approach.
You're talking about like Launchpad and the messenger, the messaging, and I guess it's the notification center.
Sometimes it's just like high level stuff. They've always had a very full featured mail client. It does Exchange, Active Sync, all this stuff. But then they said, we have this mail app on iOS. It's really simple, and it works great. I mean, why can't the one on Mac OS 10 be more like that? And so they've really simplified it. They let it run in a full screen mode if you wanted to, and it looks a lot more and works a lot more like the version on iOS. And in that case, I'm sure there are some people who maybe are missing some advanced functionality that's gone or harder to find or whatever. But, I think that's one of those areas where, simplicity wins the day, and smart for them to do it that way. So,
to kind of go back to what we were saying before on how I'll turn off some of these features and I'll disable that. That's a very Windows thing to do. Mac users, for the most part, I don't know anybody that goes through that process of shutting down services. And is it because you kind of don't
here's what I imagine.
Do it on a Mac, or is it because Windows has made it so available for you to do that you just do it? I've always wondered that. Is it because of the operating system?
I don't have my finger on the pulse of the Mac community per se, but I guess I would guess that I think the Apple people tend to be more accepting of what Apple gives them. That if Apple is giving me this, it must be good. But on the other hand, I think starting with Lion, that there's probably a small contingent of power users on the Mac side who don't like the iOS stuff. It's not hard to do something like remove the Launchpad icon from the dock. I mean, if you're never going to use Launchpad, and Launchpad is an interesting example because that grid of icons that they have on iOS is actually one of the dumbest things about iOS. And so
on the bottom, you mean?
No, that full screen Launchpad.
Oh, okay.
It's just a grid of icons. It's kind of a lousy way to launch apps. So it's not a particularly intelligent thing, but whatever. I mean, there's probably a certain segment of the population that loves that, and there's absolutely a certain segment of the population that doesn't. I mean, Windows, just by the diverse nature of its user base, and of course the machines it goes out on and the companies that ship those machines. I mean, I think we've always had more of a notion of customization and really honing in. There are people. It's hard. You can be very compulsive about it. I mean, you bring up a Windows system and you could spend days just tweaking it, and making it exactly the way you want it. And I used to do stuff like that. I used to go into the start menu and make sure it was exactly what I wanted. Now I'm like, now I just don't care anymore.
You just don't care, yeah. And I think computers are so fast now. I mean, they're at the point where they're fast enough where people aren't tweaking as much as they used to. You used to run, you were running a 700 megahertz compact. And turning off some of these services, you might have benefited from that.
In the old days, I mean, I had a 386 SX, and I remember one of the things I was very jealous of a friend of mine who had a 486 DX based PC, right? He could boot his computer into DOS, whatever it was at the time, 5 probably, and he could just run Doom, no problem. But if I wanted to run Doom on my computer, I had to have a specially formatted boot disk that left out some stuff, right? And optimized things so that memory was the best it could be for this game, and then it would run fine. But if I ran it off my normal boot disk that I would use to boot into Windows or whatever, that wouldn't work, you know? And I think that's the legacy of the Windows side of the fence.
But there's also the other side of Windows where people pack all this, you know, awful skin type plugins onto Windows, and they change the UI of it, and the thing is sucking up 30% system resources when they have no clue. Definitely. They're running, you know, listen, I forgot what they're called.
There probably isn't a Windows user on Earth who hasn't at one time tried something like Window Blinds or Object Desktop or something in some vain hope that this would turn, you know, maybe 10 years ago it would turn it into a Mac, or it would look like this or that. Or Microsoft had a temporary UI in Windows XP called Watercolor that everyone seemed to really like, and now we can get that back, you know. But the thing is, the more you screw around with stuff like that, the more you realize what an awful hack it is, and how it's not seamless and it doesn't work very well. And then eventually it's just more trouble than it's worth. And
what is it, Rain Meter? I think one is called Rain Meter.
Rain Meter, yeah. So no, listen, there's no doubt that there's some segment of the population that continues to use stuff like that, will always use stuff like that, and that's fine. But it's just not really a mainstream thing anymore.
I get really angry when I see a computer with that. My brother, when I got a Toshiba laptop, brand new, put Windows 7 on there, and he came to me, he was like, this thing isn't running well at all. Yeah. And I looked, he packed it on.
Problem.
I mean, he has like 15 things running, right, and he has 120 background system things running in the background. And I'm like, what did you do? He's like, well, I installed this thing called Rain Meter.
Right.
I'm like, why would you do that? Why? What difference does it make?
What,
I'm
you
like,
have too much time on your hands. You know what? Seriously, I was talking about the Amiga stuff on Windows Weekly today, and the one thing I'm reminded of is when you're a technology enthusiast, when what you care about is just technology, you know, it's what you're interested in. You're going to spend your time just playing with this stuff. You know, you're not using the computer as a tool to get something done. It's not an end. It's not a means to an end. It is the end itself. You're just wasting time, right? I mean, it's fine. I'm not saying it's a bad way to spend time, but you're not using the tool as originally intended, right?
Sure, yeah.
I use Windows as a platform to write and to record this podcast and to do whatever it is that I do. But tweaking Windows, you know, changing the color scheme and running those utilities, that's stuff you do when you actually have nothing to do.
Listen, right? Paul, you're using Windows to write. I'm using my Mac to look at cat pictures. We all use it for different things. I mean, that's just how it is. I think
you've just described the basic difference between the two platforms. So, yeah, no, but I mean, I think there's just a certain maturity that occurs, you know, eventually where I did spend a lot of time screwing around with computers.
But see, that's how you learn. That's how you learn to use a computer.
Yeah.
I could guarantee you 60% of our audience starting out using Windows, you know, Windows 95, Windows 98, they deleted a system file.
Yep.
And that's how you learn not to delete a system file.
Oh, no, I can't tell you the name of the file, but if you've ever screwed around with Linux, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Some crazy INI file I deleted on Windows.
Back in the days of like Slackware or whatever, you know, one of the like golden things you could try to do with Linux was get it to actually run at the native resolution of the video card you had, you know, like, or some PC acceptable resolution, like 1024 by 768. Because these things, you know, you'd boot up into this X Windows thing, and it would always be some awful, you know, motif UI that ran at some suboptimal UI, and then some optimal resolution. And you would spend all this time like hand tweaking whatever the Linux version of any files are there. I think they're dot files or whatever. It's been a long time.
I've you know, we always joke about Linux, but I honestly and Paul mocks me again for this. Paul mocks me for a lot of
mocking in our
a lot of mocking going on.
Some of my best relationships are actually involved mocking.
I really think Linux is going to start taking off.
Oh, man.
And I'm telling you, within the next 5 years, I really think Linux is going to start taking off because Windows is going in a direction that many people might not be happy with. I really think that Apple's going to go in that same direction. And what's going to happen?
No, this is not happening.
Linux is going to come in. This
So,
is it. This is the best thing that could have happened to Linux.
Opening.
This is the opening, not
this is
Red
the
Hat
year.
6. That was, by the way, my first Linux. I can't see. I bit my tongue up, and it sounds like I'm slurring, but it literally hurts every time I talk.
Are a horrible drunk.
I haven't had anything. Look at this.
You're drinking. What is that? It's like
It's Budweiser.
I know it's
awful
seriously,
beer. It's like water.
Get you going on real beer.
You know, we have Stone Brewery that came to the studio, and we did a whole beer tasting thing, and they got so angry at me every time they told me to like taste the beer
as the quintessential Budweiser drinker.
Yeah, and I'm like, I like Budweiser, and they go, no, you can't like Budweiser. It's awful.
Like craft brewers hate people like you.
Oh,
you're
you don't even
Antichrist.
know. They came from
Actually,
San Diego.
It doesn't help that you look a little bit like the
Antichrist. I know it doesn't. I look so I look like a magician.
Yeah.
I look like every financial evil guy from the 1980s. Every bad guy, like a finance bad guy, like a hedge fund guy.
Did you have like a small part in Wall Street, the original Wall Street?
Yeah, look, I probably did, and I didn't even know. I was just walking around like that's the look we're looking for, actually. Right. But the guys came into the studio and we're doing a whole tasting, and he's like, "Well, what does this taste like?" I'm like, "It tastes like it's heavy," and I'm like, "No, that's not a taste." I'm like, "No, it tastes heavy to me." And I kept saying, like, it tastes chalky or it tastes chocolatey. And they're like, no, you're so wrong. It has nothing to do with chocolate. There's no chocolate in this.
Clearly there is something wrong with your taste buds. I mean.
It's just too heavy, man. When you're sitting, I can't do it. I really can't. I tried it.
You got to meet them halfway. Like, drink like Hogarten or something. Or
no, Hogarten's really good stuff.
Yeah, there you go.
Like a Blue Moon, right?
Yeah. The Hogarten would be better than Blue Moon. But yes, Blue Moon is perfectly acceptable.
With an orange inside of it.
Oh, gosh.
No? Okay.
No, not with an orange.
Oh, okay. But a lot of people are now starting to talk about Linux, and they're getting excited.
No,
a lot
of people are not talking about Linux. You are talking about Linux.
In my circle poll, we're all talking about Linux, and it's only me.
Okay, so obviously, it's funny. I just kind of talked about this. There's a segment of the population that are literally tech enthusiasts. They're just in it for the entertainment of it. They like technology.
Sure. You.
Windows 8 is Microsoft heading in a direction that maybe isn't interesting to those people. It's Microsoft hitting the mass market, And I actually don't think that Windows 8 is going to cause any sort of major exodus from Windows. But it is possible that in the upper echelons of the tech enthusiast community, that there are going to be people who are like, this isn't what I want anymore, And actually, I wrote an article about this. One of the articles I wrote this week was called RAP Aero, and I was talking about the end of Aero. And I said, one of the things that occurs to me is that Windows is heading in a direction that is not the same direction I'm heading in personally, right? I am a power user. I use the desktop. I use actual applications. I need to multitask. I like to have multiple things on the screen at once. I run a large display. I often run dual monitors, although right now it's not set up that way. That's not where that's not where Metro's going. That's not where Microsoft is going. They're going in a completely different direction. And it's kind of a weird situation to be in, right? Because I still have to write about it. I still have to communicate what's going on and be aware of it and everything. But I also sort of realize that the stuff that I really care about the most is not necessarily where this thing is going.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think that's what those guys are feeling. I think that's where the Linux stuff is coming.
And I'm kind of feeling that too, because I'm an enthusiast and I like to tweak things, and the more closed in these operating systems are getting. And by the way, rightfully so.
What I want, and by the way, I would be happy to have this product. I want something called Windows 8 Core.
Yes.
And what Windows 8 Core is Windows 8 without Metro.
I'm sure you're going to be able to find that on the Pirate Bay in a couple months after releasing.
I don't mind. In other words, there are Metro user interfaces that kind of come in on the sides, right? Even when you're on the desktop. The Charms bar is there, the application switching stuff, the start experience and all that. It's okay. But the truth is, when I'm on a desktop computer with a big screen, I don't ever hit the start screen on purpose, ever.
Yeah.
Like, I have to use it to do start search, which is fine. I'm okay. It's okay. I can make this transition. It's okay. But the truth is, on a desktop computer, my screen is never going to be on the start screen. It's never going to be. It just isn't. It's okay. I mean, I'm okay with it. I guess the only problem I have is just that I don't have any way to get rid of it. You know?
Yeah, and I think that's a problem that a lot of people have.
Yes. Right.
And so what's your option? And maybe the chat room is a great source for information on this. What are you going to do if, let's say,
so I'll tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to screw around with it.
You're not going to go to Linux.
I'm not going to go to, no, I'm not.
You mean you're not going to use the new Mint 13?
No, although I did,
Okay.
I was reading about that the other day.
It looks great.
I remain intrigued by these things that are on the fringe. Like I've always been interested in Linux. I've always taken that kind of, the Dos Equis guy approach to Linux, which is like, I do not run Linux, but if I did run Linux, I would run Ubuntu Linux.
Yeah, yeah.
That kind of thing. But I don't, I mean, I can't claim that I actively keep up on it. There was a several year period, a very long time, where I would always install the latest version of a few different Linux distributions. Fedora Linux was one, Red Hat before that, and obviously Ubuntu and some of the Ubuntu derivatives, Kubuntu and the education version and so forth. I don't do that anymore. I just don't. I really feel like this stuff is on the fringe, but I do. I read about it, and I mean, look. I love technology. I mean, in the end, I sort of gravitated toward Windows not because of any kind of inherent preference for it, but the Mac was unobtainable. It was just too expensive. Windows was where it was. I mean, I talked about the 386SX I had. I mean, back in 1993, when Paul didn't have a penny to his name and needed to, get a computer, I could build a low end. That 386SX I had, by the way, was an AMD 386SX.
Wow.
So it was even lamer than an Intel one. I mean, it was like a really low end box. But, there's something interesting about a machine that you can build yourself, that you can add on to. You can improve the components over time. It's not something 40, whatever year old I am, 43, 45, whatever I am, year old Paul would do today. But the 23-year-old Paul, or whatever I was back then, how old was I? 25, whatever, it doesn't matter. Absolutely had the energy and the time and the interest to do that kind of stuff. And like you said, it is how you learn. And it's all very valuable and everything. But at some point, you get a job and life moves on.
Yeah,
and you have to get stuff done. You don't have time to dick around,
But see, are people going to, and here's the question to this. The mainstream, I believe, will accept Windows 8 and they'll be happy with Windows 8 because it's pretty. So. But what's going to happen to the core that is not happy with this? They don't really care for Metro. And there are some people, they could totally block Metro out of their minds, and they'll just go straight into the desktop environment. And I'm sure there's going to be something that you can install to do that'll auto boot, the desktop environment.
So by the way, Microsoft is working very hard to make sure that it doesn't happen. It's something interesting and a little disturbing. There are methods right now for getting into the desktop directly. Those are going away. Microsoft doesn't want you to do that. I've said elsewhere that there's kind of an implicit statement that Microsoft is making with Windows 8, which involves, we've tried to do the separate product thing before and you haven't bought it. So we did the Zune player and nobody cared. We did Windows Phone and so far no one's cared. Now we could have done Windows RT as a standalone tablet OS, but you know what? People didn't buy that stuff in the past. And frankly, we need this to sell. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put it in Windows because you know what? Even if you hate it, it's going to sell 300 to 400 million copies every single year, no matter what. And
it's a success. Yeah.
Right. It's in there. So I think there are going to be levels of ignoring Metro. There are going to be people like me who simply Windows key plus D, go to the desktop, skip the start screen, and they get their work done. Every once in a while, I will see Metro, right? I need to do start search, which actually works very well, by the way, for whatever that's worth. But on my desktop computer, not going to use Metro. And a smaller segment, though. Well, let me just. There's a group of people who are going to bypass Metro or run utilities that bring the start menu back or stuff like that. I really feel like that's a waste of time, but people will do that.
No, they will do that, but I'm just the only concern that I have is, the perception of what Windows is relies on the enthusiasts because they are the ones that are blogging. They're the passionate ones that are writing all these articles. What will happen if all these bloggers come out and start, and I'm not talking about you that's, a little bit understanding of how it works, but what's going to happen when all these people go online and they go, Windows 8 sucks. And there's no explanation on why it sucks. They're just saying that it sucks, and it's could it possibly be Vista all over again?
Right.
As far as perception goes,
Vista was not the disaster that people
no,
think
no,
it
no,
was.
not at all. And I think they got their act together by SP1. You know, they put that first patch and they fixed all their issues. But the perception of Windows,
Yep. It dogged them from day
Vista,
one. So,
till the end.
unbeknownst to all of us, by the way, Microsoft is right now very heavily courting people who are not in the Microsoft camp. So there are people that write primarily about Apple or mobile platforms, whatever. Microsoft is going very heavily after those people.
And it's very smart of them, yeah.
Right now, yes. So you're going to see and have, actually, if you were paying attention, you will have already seen surprisingly positive stories about Windows 8 from people that maybe you would have been not suspected that from. And
yeah, the same guys who wrote. It's the same guys who wrote that article about Windows 7, Windows Phone 7.5 being this amazing thing compared to Windows 7.
Okay. I can't speak to that part of it, but yes, absolutely. So, I think what they want to avoid is Vista, and I don't mean Vista like as a disaster, but Vista as a perceived disaster. If they can get ahead of that, I think they'll be all set. And I think that's what they're working toward. It clearly is I know it's what they're working toward. Like I said, worst case for Windows 8 is it sells as well as Vista, in which case it owns the world. So, I think they're going to be okay.
Listen, regardless, it's going to be a success with the numbers. I mean, Vista was a success. Vista didn't fail.
But you know what? But here's the thing. So you as a technology enthusiast, me, these other people, I mean, ultimately what we care about is not how well it sells, but rather how good it is, right? So one of the fears that I have for Windows 8 is that they will not improve the platform for 3 years, that they will let this thing sit there and fester, essentially. It's like kind of an awful word, but and wait 3 years to come out with Windows 9. I really feel that what Microsoft needs to do for this release, because like you said, it is a mobile OS, it is a mobile platform. They need to update it like a mobile platform, and that means doing once a year.
Well, they haven't. I mean, they haven't done that since when? When was, I think XP was the last operating system that they put out, where the SP updates. SP1 and SP2 were real, updates to the operating system rather than just being patches that have been accumulating.
By the way, I just want to point out, I just got a beer delivery.
They do. Look at that. Wow, that's nice and frosty.
It seems like you're, I don't want to say lagging behind or milking.
No, I had no. Do you want to know what I did? You're gonna yell at me again. I just put this energy drink in my beer just because I was curious on what it would taste like, and it tastes awful.
Yes, it should taste awful.
It's disgusting.
This is how butterflies protect themselves against predators. It's it should be terrible.
It's awful. No, but I understand what you're saying. Now, where do you think this leaves the Mac user? What happens to?
Well, I think they're in the same place, right? I mean, the Mac community is very interesting because there was a core community of very enthusiastic users who for years kept this thing afloat, right? Now, Apple, by virtue of the fact that they've made very popular devices, first the iPod, and then finally the iPhone and the iPad, is now seeing an explosion in Mac OS X growth. They're still not, kind of eating into the Windows user base per se, but it's definitely growing. And I would have to say by this point, the majority of those people that use OS X are not those serious Apple goons that can't stand to see anything negative.
No, not
Apple.
at all.
They're just like regular people. They don't even understand what the argument is.
No, that's totally changed because of the iPhone and the iPad. Yeah, I think it has been great, entry level Mac product.
But they still have that core base of enthusiasts, right? They may be insane. They may be, tunnel visioned and one-sided and all that kind of stuff. But, they care. Kind of like Rodney Dangerfield in Back to School. I don't know what the guy cares about something. What it is, we'll never know, I mean, they care. They really care.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you something, Paul. If you went back 10 years ago, if you walked into a Starbucks in New York City, there were a couple writers that were on a Mac, but
now
nothing like it. I mean, you go into Manhattan, I have not seen one Windows laptop.
Yeah, but you know what? Those guys are, unfortunately, they're like the Mac version of lemmings. They have no idea what they're doing. They're just, they're buying the trendy machine. Like, I like the iPhone. I'll just buy this, I could defend this to my dying day. I really do believe that Windows 7 is superior to Mac OS X Lion. It's a better system. I understand the allure of Mac hardware, but the Mac software stuff, it's just not interesting.
You know what? You know what's funny? I would have disagreed with you 2 years ago when Leopard was out.
Okay.
I would have disagreed with you and told you Leopard is a great operating system. It might even be a little better than Windows 7. Now
Yeah.
with Lion,
Okay.
I'm not happy with Lion at all.
Well, but you represent that type of person I was talking about earlier. In other words, I think to the general computer user, the people who are attracted to the Mac platform because they had a positive experience with the iPod or the iPhone or the iPad, or God help us, all three, buy a Mac. And when Apple adds those mobile features to the Mac, for those people, that's nice. This is familiar. This is what they want. But to the people who are the real advocates of the platform, the old school Mac advocate types, it's not a betrayal, but it's like this is not what they're looking for. I think, let's be honest, this is not what they're looking for. And they'll just need to cope with it in the same way that I actually don't think that there's a huge Windows advocacy user group. I mean, I think most people come to Windows with a much more pragmatic viewpoint than Mac users do. They do it because it gives them the choice and the diversity of machines and price points and the ability to upgrade as they want. It's compatible with everything.
Yeah.
It's not, I love Windows. It's, I love the choices.
Listen, also go try buying $1,000, Mac tower, desktop.
Right,
go try buying that. That doesn't exist. You can't go buy a Mac Pro for $1,000.
But I'm sorry, that's middle America right there. That's everybody. I mean, that's. I
always say we as enthusiasts forget about the mainstream, and I think the same thing goes to Windows 8. We are forgetting what the mainstream wants and the mainstreame needs.
Right.
They don't need to shut down services.
Remember that. But that's the kind of comeuppance I've had with Windows 8, where I've come to the realization that it's funny, I don't think of myself as a power user. I've never certainly positioned myself as like some kind of a Windows expert. It's more like, I think the one thing I've been able to do is communicate more effectively than Microsoft what's going on, that I can cut through the crap that they put out and say, here's what's happening. But the way things are right now with Windows 8, I'm sort of coming to this realization that I am actually part of a much smaller group than I used to be, because the stuff that I care about is not where Windows is going. I mean, I love the mobile stuff. Don't get me wrong. I'm very interested in tablets. I've had every iPad. I will buy many Windows 8 tablets. For smartphones, of course, I get it. But, for me to get work done, for what I do for a living, I use a computer. It's like a computer.
Yeah, you're not going to be using. You're not going to be relying on a netbook. You're not going to be relying on a tablet to do your everyday things.
If you drive around in the streets, you'll see people in pickup trucks and SUVs, and most of those people don't need those vehicles, right? It'll be a tiny blonde woman driving a huge SUV
with nobody in it.
Some guy that wishes he was like a farmer or something driving a pickup truck, and he's just driving it to his job on Wall Street, right? But there are in fact a small segment of people who do need those vehicles for some reason, whatever it is. Maybe they have 8 kids, or they, God help them, or they actually use it for work. There's a guy who lives, I can see his house from here right now. He drives a diesel pickup truck. It's as loud as a UPS truck. He has never put anything in the bed of that truck. He has never towed anything from the back of that truck.
Yeah.
And he drives it because he associates with that lifestyle or that thing. You know what I mean? It's just it's his. It's the face he wants to present to the world, right? God love him, whatever. I don't care. I mean, it's fine. But I actually need this kind of computer. I just do. And there are going to be some people like that. And I just have to accept that Windows 8 is moving in a different direction.
Okay, so let's play this game. Let's say, whatever comes after Mountain Lion is a major revamp of the operating system,
right?
And they kind of go into this iOS type environment, much like how Microsoft has evolved Windows 8, and what it is now. I'm just curious to see what the perception is going to be of the Mac user. Are they going to have this, oh my God, panic? The operating system is totally different. I hate it without even using it type perception, or are they going to embrace it because it's Apple?
Mac users, again, they tend to be more accepting, right? You're not going to have the mass revolt stuff that you're going to see on the Windows side because, frankly, it's a smaller audience anyway. I mean, it's just they tend to be more, there's this notion that if Apple is giving it to us, they do know better than us. So maybe we should look into this and see if it's okay, that kind of thing. We can slyly on the side ignore it, but I don't think you're never going to see some group of Mac advocates stand up against Apple. They just love the company too much. Microsoft, by comparison, is the U.S. government. There's always going to be some segment of the population that's pissed off about something that Microsoft is doing. So it's a different relationship, for starters.
Yeah, listen, all I'm saying is you got to give it a chance before you start making these opinions about these products. I don't use an iPhone every day. I have an iPod Touch that I get the iOS, I had the experience and I know what I'm talking about when I comment on certain things. My wife has an iPhone, but I have an Android phone as my everyday phone. Another example is this phone that I have here. I went on the air.
Is that a phone or is that a tablet?
It's a phone. This is a Galaxy Note, and I have to tell you, for weeks I bashed this phone, and I said it has to be one of the worst ideas ever. Who wants this type of phone? Who wants a 5-inch phone?
By the way, you know who wants that phone?
Who?
That thing, whatever it is. My son.
Does he
talks
really?
about this all the time. And I finally said, Mark, I don't get it. I said, look, it's an Android sort of tablet. It's like holding an iPhone or iPad to your head. Why do you want this thing? And you know what he said to me?
What did he say?
This is amazing.
It's cool.
It has a pen.
Oh my God, he wants the stylus.
He wants the pen.
You know what? You've been training him to be a great Microsoft employee.
I just think that's bizarre. It goes against everything
there it is.
That we've been told about these touch devices.
There you go. I'm using the stylus right now. No, I have to tell you, Paul, I really like I love this phone. I really do. And I hated it. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like the plastic that they use that kind of like messes up your brain.
It's a Samsung, right?
It's a Samsung.
And does it have that really thin back?
It's really thin. Yeah.
Peels off.
Yeah. It's super thin. But okay. It's an awesome phone. The battery life is phenomenal on this thing. The battery life is phenomenal.
What's the camera like?
Really good.
Wow.
Really good. And that was the crazy part. I'm like, I'm going to hate this thing, and I feel bad because AT&T sent it, and I'm going to have to do this review about how much I hate this stupid phone. I like it a lot.
That relationship.
I like it a lot. And I called the AT&T rep that sent it, and I go, I'm going to be honest with you. I initially did not want to do this review because I thought I was going to hate it, and I felt bad because I like you, but I had to be honest about it on the air.
Yep.
The thing is awesome.
Wow.
I actually don't use my Nexus anymore, and I'm walking around with this phone.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. I don't know what it is, but here, this is a perfect example of, what my opinion was before using the product.
Sure.
What my opinion was when I got the product, and what it is after a month.
I understand what you're saying. You're saying that experience has actually changed your view of something.
Yes, actually. Yes.
Amazing.
Yes.
That means that it's almost like you're a sentient being and that you can grow or improve.
I the first time I heard someone give this thing a positive review was Leo. Leo was talking about it on the air, and he was saying how great the phone is. I'm like, this guy's out of his mind.
The actual phone.
The actual phone, yeah. He was talking about how great it is, and he was doing a demo of it, and he was using the stylus. I'm like, he has to be losing his mind. That nobody wants to use a phone this big.
By the way, it's funny you say this. I think this was one of the things that was in the show notes. The iPhone, the iPhone has taught us to pretend that phone calls don't matter anymore, right?
Yeah.
I mean, implicitly, they never said that. It was supposed to be a great phone. It was a terrible phone. It's always been a terrible phone. Terrible signal reception, terrible phone quality. If you want the worst phone call ever in the history of mankind, dating back to whoever invented the phone, was it Edison?
Yes.
Call an iPhone from an iPhone. It is the worst call quality you can possibly have. But it's funny. I had the same experience with the Lumia 900 where, Windows Phone in general always has had better call quality. But there's something about this Nokia, like where they...
It was Bell, by the way, who invented the phone. Was it in Alexander Graham Bell?
Actually, it was probably someone in Italy or...
Yeah. Marconi. It was Marconi. Marconi invented everything.
I'm 2 beers into this, so you got to excuse the memory. But phone calls matter, and you realize that because, again, I think there's a wonderful little justification that occurs when you spend a lot of money on an important piece of technology and you stop being critical about it because, this must be good because I bought it and my opinion matters and I spend a lot of money on it and I don't do that unless it's really good. And you stop being critical of this thing that in fact doesn't work very well.
Sure.
And here you are and you bought this or you have this new device and oh my God, the call works. And it's funny because I've had the same experience with the Lumia, where it's like, this is really good. You know, I had a call yesterday from a guy where I could barely hear him. I thought, wow, usually these calls are great. And then I moved it like a quarter of an inch up, and it was like, you know, like really loud.
There's two things that I would love for every phone to realize that you kind of need to fix this, and you'll sell a lot of phones. One is the speaker on these things, because they're awful. The speaker on this is excellent. Yeah. And the camera, you know, this kind of goes into what the conversation was last week. And when we played the 10-year game, we were saying, you know, how the point and shoot is going to be dead, and it's going to be the camera on the phone. But I'm still amazed that with the iPhone being so dominant with their camera, and they've been dominant for, you know, 3 years now with their camera.
Yeah.
Why haven't we seen somebody else put a camera that's as good as the iPhone? I mean,
that's an excellent question.
You're not talking about this revolutionary product that came out 6 months ago and it's kicking everybody's ass. You're talking about something that's been around for a couple of years, and it's still dominant as far as the camera goes.
So we live in the United States. And,
are you sure?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay.
And one of the things that we've always been led to believe is that Nokia has incredible optics in their cameras. Carl Zeiss lenses, so, you know, supposed to be awesome. And so as Americans, we've been waiting for these Nokia devices to come to the United States. And now they have. And amazingly, the camera, at least in the Lumia 900 that I've tested, is not great. It's not bad. It's just not great. It's on par with the cameras I've seen on Windows Phone before. Not what I was expecting. You know, I was thinking this will be the one, you know, and they could still do it. I think that part of the limitation on Windows Phone is that the base technology for the camera just doesn't exist. It's just not sophisticated enough. And I think that's the reason why you see Nokia is doing that crazy high pixel, you know, megapixel camera that's still based on Symbian or System, whatever, because the software support is just not there in Windows Phone yet. And so that will change, but yeah, it's been years, you know. I got this is like a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, I got what for the time would have been a fairly high resolution camera on a Droid X, probably 5 megapixels. I don't remember, but it was, the pictures were just horribly disappointing. And if you remember that camera, it had a huge bump at the top to accommodate, I'm sorry, the phone. It had a huge bump at the top to accommodate the camera. This is something you see on a lot of Android phones.
Yeah, you won't see it with you won't see that with Apple.
Well, no, the whole thing is thick. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you'll see razor thin phones on Android and then a bump for the camera. On Apple, what you'll see is a medium thick phone where it's all as thick as it needs to be to accommodate the camera and then the battery. I don't know what they did exactly. I can't explain it, but for whatever reason, you know, I would say starting with the iPhone 4 especially, and then the iPhone 4S even better. They have the best cameras. They just do.
Again, you know, we're not talking about battery technology that we know has not really evolved into what it should be. We're talking about something that does exist. And
why? Right. So in other words, why isn't there an Android phone, even one?
Even one, yeah.
Maybe there is. You know, there's
there isn't. There isn't.
Okay, so certainly not one I've tested. You know, the Google phone, the latest one, the Droid.
The one I have here, the Nexus.
The Nexus.
Yeah.
The one I have as well. Camera's terrible.
Oh, God, it's awful.
It's awful.
Yeah.
This is the pure really Android experience. Apparently, the pure Android experience is crap. I guess that was what they were shooting for. You know, it's just awful. I'm curious about some phones. I guess the HTC One X or whatever.
The one, another awful camera.
Okay, it's supposed to be pretty good. So I don't know. Yeah, I've never seen it.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're comparing let's compare. I mean, this is probably the Galaxy is probably the Galaxy Note is probably the best camera phone that I've used.
Is it as good as the iPhone 4S?
No, it's not as good as the iPhone 4S, but it's pretty close. I mean, I'm going to try to take a picture now.
I mean, here's the problem. Like,
I mean, it's pretty good.
We're going on vacation this summer, right? So
we are, Paul. We are.
You and I.
Yeah. We're just going away.
It's going to be strange. But the question is, do you bring you know, in other words, am I going to trust the Lumia 900 for these photos, the family, you know, the vacation photos?
No, yeah, most probably not.
If I was using an iPhone 4S, would I trust that camera for those photos? Maybe. That's the closest one, especially when you consider the fact that you can actually add lenses to it like you would to an SLR. It's kind of incredible. That is the only one where I would maybe consider it. Now I've got, what is it? It's end of May, so June, July, I got like 2 months. At some point, I'm going to have to either buy a camera, like an actual camera, which I don't want to do, or I'm going to have to get a different smartphone. What's going to happen? I don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens. I wish I could just bring my camera. I mean, my phone, rather. You know.
Yeah, I mean,
I wish I could.
It's. I'm going through some of the pictures that I took, and I have to tell you, it's pretty close to the iPhone's quality.
Is it?
Yeah. And you know, it's a big phone, so yeah, I guess they could put a bigger sensor in here and do a much better job. But
well, how thick is it though?
It's very thin. I mean, it's.
Yes, I don't know how they do that. It's interesting. I mean, the
I
iPhone 4S. Do you have an iPhone 4S now?
Yeah, my wife does. Just has one.
So you can't really compare it right in a second, but you should compare it to the thickness of that. I'm gonna guess that the iPhone 4S is actually thicker.
Yeah, double the size.
Double.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
so
double,
you see the problem, right? In other words, the iPhone.
But you know what? I'm surprised. Here's the crazy thing. You know, HTC has put out a phone that's specifically for music. You know, I think it was the Resound. Everybody does this. Everybody has like a specific phone. I think LG put out a Netflix phone. Why haven't we seen?
You are about to hit on something that is nearing genius.
Why haven't we seen? And Paul,
right.
Tell me if I'm out of line here. Why haven't we seen a phone that's maybe a little thicker, but it prides itself on the photography and really kicks the iPhone's ass?
By the way, what you just said is genius. Yes.
You know what? I would probably buy that. I would give up the luxury of having an ultra thin phone to have something that's a phenomenal camera.
In other words, a camera or a phone that has a camera that has optical zoom, that has varying levels of widescreen and
by the way, Nokia's doing this, right? Nokia's doing this, but again, nobody's going to go buy that. It's not an operating system that anybody cares about. 48 megapixels. First of all, you don't need 48 megapixels on a camera phone. You don't need 48 megapixels.
Not at all.
Ever.
In fact, never. The type of point and shoot that I would buy. There's a term for this. I'm not remembering it, but it's the last 3 cameras I bought have had very large optical zoom capacity, 12x or higher, something like that, very high. But they're just point and shoot cameras, right? What I want is a phone camera that offers, I don't know, 5x optical zoom. Like I just don't want softwares. I don't want
Instagram. Instagram was the greatest thing that could have happened to camera phones because it just masks all the crappy photos you're taking.
Yeah, well, right. I'm not looking for hokey effects. I mean, what I want literally is to be. In other words, you go out for the day. You're on vacation. You could be anywhere. You could be in Paris. You could be out in the Caribbean. You could be in Cape Cod. Whatever. It doesn't matter. You're out for the day. And so you take pictures. It's morning. You're at the beach. Whatever. It's sunlight, cloudy. It doesn't matter. Raining. Whatever. You're inside. You're in a museum. It's nighttime. You're on a boat. There are lights reflecting on the water. Those pictures all need to come out well, right? And I don't actually think there is a cell phone or a smartphone camera that can do that.
By the way, there is a Polaroid Android HD smart camera that has optical zoom.
Really?
I've never seen this thing.
Can you send me a link to that?
$299. It was supposed to arrive in April. Yeah, it's in our chat room actually. Let me see if I can put it in the show notes.
Interesting. You won't be able to put it in show notes, by the way, because I had the same problem this week.
Do you see it?
Yes, I do.
Okay, there we go.
But see, what happens is I try to select it, and it's like, oh, you can't do that. Come on.
I'm looking here, and it looks like a. I
can't actually.
You can't open it, huh?
I can't open it.
Now I'm gonna have to email you this. Actually, no, I could Skype message it, right?
Skype me.
Yeah, let me see. Thurrott. There we go. I believe it was the article was published in January. And the thing has optical. And you know what? It's almost as thick as an iPhone. Maybe a little thicker.
Okay.
I mean, but it's running Android.
It's funny because it looks like a camera.
But it's not. But once again, the problem, it's Polaroid that's putting it out. So nobody's going to go and buy this.
By the way, there's no such thing as Polaroid. But it's an Android phone. Probably from a no name Chinese, whatever. It's 16 megapixels. It has a lens that actually comes out of the camera like you would see in a point and shoot, which is interesting, by the way.
I mean,
I've never heard of this. This is very interesting. So I guess it depends on what's most important to you, right?
Yeah, listen, and this is the total extreme. For something to be successful, I know, me too. And if I had known this exists, I would be a little bit more interested.
This is very
actually no, it's on Polaroid's website. Yeah,
is it really?
Yeah,
Polaroid's website.
So who's selling this? You know what's interesting? They have no information about the
Polaroid
actual
is a
phone.
name that anyone can license. So we actually have no idea who makes this.
Yeah, who knows who's making it? But
so you're saying there's a Polaroid website?
Yeah, Polaroid.com.
Polaroid. Polaroid. Here's Paul trying to type Polaroid.com. Okay.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about this phone. We don't even know if it's probably not for sale. They probably scrapped this whole idea.
It's not a bad idea.
No, it's not bad at all. But what you need for something like this to be successful in the mainstream is have maybe an HTC. Or, I don't know, maybe Google get behind something like this and try to make it successful.
And by the way, this is an awesome idea. Anyone can make a cell phone. HTC, Samsung, Apple, whatever. It doesn't matter. But make a thing where you can have that kind of a lens plug on to the phone body. And that's what you take on vacation. In other words, 355 days of the year, all I want to do is carry around a smartphone. But once a year, twice a year, whatever it is, I go on vacation. And for those days, I want to plug a lens onto the back of this thing and use it like a point and click.
So it's also called the Altec Leo.
Altec.
I guess that's the company that makes it, and they have it's also called the Aero A8. So you know what they've done? It's one manufacturer that's given it out to everybody.
Well, like I said, the Polaroid name can be licensed.
Yeah, but again, this is not a real phone. We'll never see this in this country.
So this doesn't actually exist.
It physically exists, but nobody has this.
The problem with this thing is, so here we are. We're looking at an Android phone that's basically a point-and-click camera, right? I guess the argument is, why not just buy a point-and-click camera?
Yeah. You need a combination, a little bit of.
Problem,
it needs to be more phone than camera. I mean, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, is this thing good enough to use as a phone? I mean, probably not. I would imagine with the lens in there, it'd be pretty heavy. And
yeah, Paul. One thing that I'm actually surprised at, and let's compare that, is the iPod Touch. Why hasn't the iPod Touch put the camera on the iPhone 4S on this thing and really kill the point and shoot market?
Actually, it's because of the thinness. So if you were to put an iPod Touch next to an iPhone 4S,
it's much thicker. Yeah.
Oh, the iPhone. The goal for the iPhone should always be for that device to be as thin as the iPod Touch. The iPod Touch is got to be half the thickness, maybe less.
Maybe a little less, yeah.
Maybe less. So the optics in that camera are not as good as what you see in the iPhone. And let's face it, I mean, Apple, God help them if they ever put a camera that was as good or better in the iPod Touch as they put in the iPhone. People would buy that and they would just carry it around because it would be so cheap to do so. And that's not Apple's business model.
See, I was trying to do that with this, and I was trying to replace a point and shoot with this camera. So I would walk around. Before I had my phone, I had a regular Motorola Droid, so the camera was even worse. So I was walking around with this thing, and I was snapping pictures, and I was thinking, I'm like, you know what? This would be an awesome camera because you have all the apps there, you have everything there. Even if it was $100 more for the better camera, a lot of people go and buy it.
But if you buy one of those camera lens attachments for that thing, which I don't know if they exist, but let's pretend
they do, and it doesn't work right.
Okay, so I mean, at that point, you're spending enough money where it's like, just buy a point and click for Christ's sakes. I mean, what are you doing? I mean, you're adding complexity. It does all this other stuff. I get it, but I mean, if the point is I'm going to go out on vacation, in other words, like I said, I'm going to go on vacation this summer, so. How much would it cost to buy a camera? Just buy a camera. Even if I only used it for that one trip, a couple $100, right?
Yeah.
The pictures I will take with even a mainstream point and click camera will be so superior to anything I could ever take with any cell phone camera, including the iPhone 4S. It just doesn't even make sense.
Listen, I think that all these guys are looking at the entire the phone market wrong. I think in order for there's a Google phone, of course, and like this is a very niche phone. This is for the person that wants a tablet and they want the Android experience because they're not going to go buy an iPhone or an iPad. They'll use this. But I'm just shocked that we have not seen HTC, LG, Samsung put out a phone that's specifically for the photographers out there or the photo, the
I think you're onto
enthusiasts.
something, because I really do think that is a huge market.
Yeah, you know why? Because everybody's looking at it as, well, we need to top the iPhone. How are we going to do this? Well, it makes too much sense.
One of the ways was you could top the optics. I mean,
yeah, but that makes too much sense. Everybody's talking about HD displays. Everybody's talking about 4G. Everybody's talking about thinness, but they're not really.
Doesn't matter.
I'll give up a half an inch for
half an inch, but I give a quarter of an inch.
Quarter,
I mean,
yeah.
It depends. Well, who knows? The Nexus phone is thick. It's big. It's heavy. I mean, are you telling me you can't fit a really good camera into that space?
They can.
I think you could.
And by the way, there is a little. I'm actually going to see if there's a little bump for the camera. Here's the back. I don't know if you guys can see the back. Yeah, it bumps. It comes out. Yeah, it comes out. And you know what? You can make this come out a little bit more.
Yep.
They could have done it.
Oh, come on. If that thing was an incredible iPhone 4S Plus type camera and it came out like quarter of an inch, oh my God, people would embrace that.
Yeah, but you know what else is also the problem with this? This phone is $300. The iPhone, the already is $300 without a great camera. The iPhone is $199 starting. This is $300 starting.
Yeah.
So you already have $100. You're over, what the iPhone is like. It's a crazy game they're playing. I mean, it's insane, and I don't know. I just don't have an answer for why they're doing things that way. It's the same as why is there still a 1.3 megapixel camera in the front of these cameras? They can't go to 3.
Well,
I mean, they can't go to 3. Everybody has a 1.3.
Yeah, I mean that may not. Honestly, I think you could make the argument that by limiting the resolution and the quality of that camera, they're limiting the amount of bandwidth you take up when you send video. And I think, honestly, most people probably would make that trade-off. I suspect that the lack of a decent camera on the back has to do with it just isn't yet enough of a demand from people. But if it was, I just don't see how that couldn't be addressed like right now.
See, but these are the same. Now this is where I get annoyed, because these are the same people that are walking around with an iPad 2, and they're taking pictures with their iPad 2, and it's totally grainy. I have a relative that does this.
That I have not beaten to death someone in public for taking photos with an iPad.
I have a relative.
That is the dumbest freaking thing I've ever seen in my life. That camera sucks. And you are carrying something the size of an 8.5 by 11 piece of pad of paper.
Yeah.
Are you like a freaking idiot?
I'll tell you this.
That is amazing to me.
I have a relative, and she'll take photos at every birthday party, graduation, whatever it is, with the iPad. And I constantly told her, I'm like, listen, these are really bad images. They're low res. She has a camera. She has the same Canon, the Canon S90, which is a phenomenal camera. She just bought it, but she uses the iPad because it's the iPad.
If I ever end up in jail,
that's going to be a reason why.
That's going to be. It's going to be someone taking pictures with an iPad.
So it gets even better. So they went out. The husband went out and bought her a very expensive printer that'll do high res photo quality images. So now I go over because they don't know how to set it up, and I set up the printer. And she's like, print this picture. I'm like, listen, it's not going to look good. So she wants an 8x10 of everything she's printed.
Sure.
It comes out grainy. I mean, everything is grainy. Everything looks like it was taken.
The iPad camera sucks.
So
it's terrible.
Yes, but now she has all the camera. She has all the pictures. Like, why does this look bad? Why is the printer's broken?
Because you took it with an iPad.
And that's what I said. And they turn around and go, no, but it has a camera. It's supposed to work right. It's the printer. The printer's bad. They returned the printer.
The printer.
They are refusing to understand the fact
that
killing
the messenger.
I know, but people are doing this. You see it in Manhattan all the time. People just walking around with giant iPads and just snapping pictures.
It's like it's you should just wear a T-shirt that says "Mug me" on the back. I am clearly an idiot. Take what I have.
One of the funniest things I've seen, which was awful. It was a bunch of tourists that were taking pictures with the iPad.
Yep.
And they were holding up traffic. They were literally just holding up traffic and just snapping pictures in Times Square. This guy walks by and just slaps it out of her hand and just keeps walking. And I laughed.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I felt great about it, actually.
Is that guy me?
It was actually Paul Thurrott. People don't know. Yeah. Why don't we play the 10-year game? Okay. And then I know you got to be out of here at 6, so we have 10 minutes to wrap this up. People go to winsuperside.com. You can get the show there. It's also on our website, gfqnetwork.com. We have a new gfqlive.tv, and a lot of people are there today. We redid the website, and we're still tweaking.
Do our sponsor stuff first?
No, it's a drinking show.
Okay.
No advertisers today.
All right, fine. That's fine.
Let me gfqnetwork.com. Yes, the chat room is mocking me now. And now I have a little pop-up on my Mac, and I can't click on our page. There we go. So 10-year game.
Yes.
We got 2 of them this week that I really like. 1, the internet. Well, will the internet be in 10 years?
Yep.
2, cell phone batteries.
Ah.
It's interesting because we'll go with cell phone batteries first. We'll save the internet for last. So cell phone batteries, where will it be in 10 years? Paul, you want to go first with this?
Yeah, I mean, Apple has done a decent job of innovating in this area where they, obviously what they used to do was what everyone else does, was you had some kind of a battery of whatever rectangular size and you kind of put it in there and that was that. And what they eventually developed was a system where they could kind of pour a battery into the space that was available in the phone and they could have a much bigger battery. When you look at any Apple mobile device today, a huge chunk of it is taken up by the battery. And I think that's kind of the future. You made a comment earlier about battery life not being where it needs to be, but I have to say Apple in particular and the rest of industry has followed. They started off with really bad battery life with their devices and more to the point, inability of these devices to retain a battery charge, right? You used to get like an Apple device and you'd leave it sitting on your desk doing nothing. And you wake up in the morning, it would be dead, and that stuff doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. It's gotten a lot better. I mean, technology has changed too. That's another thing with the battery life. It's changed. Do you think there's going to be a dramatic improvement? I was reading this article about 3 weeks ago about how they have discovered a way for the silicone coating, I guess, of the inside of the battery, the lithium ion, to not, break apart after a couple of charges, because that's what happens, and therefore it doesn't hold the charge. But they discovered a new way of doing this where the battery life is extended dramatically because it's able to hold the charge.
I think we're already seeing incredible battery life in devices and PCs. That you can buy Lenovo PCs today that have like 22 or 24, 26 hours of battery life. I think realistically, all we really need out of battery life is day-long battery life. And that the future of this stuff, I think the more meaningful future or the more meaningful aspect of this is the ability to charge. That because of the pervasiveness of battery-based devices, that there will be standards for inductive charging where you can you'll just put your phone down on the desk and it will charge. You won't have to think about it. In the early days, that will require a special desk. You'll go to IKEA and buy a special IKEA desk, not just an IKEA desk, but eventually you'll put a phone down in your car, you'll put a phone down in your office, you'll put a phone down in
and it'll be charging, yeah.
It will just be charging. And I think I think the future of this isn't so much the battery technology as it is the
way we charge. I mean, listen, Palm was the first one to do that. What was it? The Stone?
Yeah.
So you would just set it on there and it would charge it. You need a special back, but
We'll look back on that and say, how weird, you needed a special device to charge something. Yeah. Things just charge.
It's actually that's a very interesting point. I never saw it that way.
Yeah. I think that's
very good, Paul. That's actually really good. Also with the fact that we've gone to lithium ion, it's really changed, especially in laptops and mobile phones. Before, tell me if I'm wrong, Paul, but I remember the first time I got my laptop, they would say in order for you to save the battery life on the laptop, you have to make sure it's not always plugged in. You got to drain the battery.
Actually, they still say that.
You got to charge it overnight, drain it again, and then let it charge and don't do anything. There was this whole process.
You literally need to let it drain, yeah. By the way, I think that's still applicable today.
Apple tells you not to do that. Apple says it's better to keep it charged all the time.
Oh, that's very interesting. I don't know about that. I mean, maybe this is like an old school thing, but I will occasionally. I did this with I complained about the battery life of the iPad 3, right? One of the things I did recently was let it just die. I sat there and I kept the screen running. I was watching TV and I just let it die. The warning would come up, 5% left, 1% left. Eventually it just died. And then I let it sit overnight, let it die, like really die. And then I plugged it in, hoping that would fix the battery life issue I was having. Actually,
Did it?
It hasn't been too bad since I was.
No, I'm almost positive because when I got the MacBook, I was reading, I guess, whatever instructions they tell you on you see how I do the reading signal, but it was really online. Yeah. I was reading it online. I haven't
picked up an actual book in like 20 years.
There's no book that comes with the Mac that's this big. I'm literally flipping through pages. But I was reading about the battery and what to do because I was concerned with the battery life because on my other Mac that I had, it was a couple years old. It was awful. I mean, when the battery life died, I had like 20% battery health, and I would get that little warning next to it. Yeah. But with the new Macs, they tell you it's better for you to constantly keep it charged. Yeah, they tell you keep it charged.
So that tells me that they have adapted to the technology to the way that people actually use it.
And that's smart. I mean, nobody's unplugging this thing.
No, and that's the problem, right? Because why would you? I mean, you're going to unplug it when you're using it at home? Of course you're not. But I mean, yeah. So that's good. That tells me, if that's true, it tells me that, I don't mean you're lying, but if that's what they're doing, which I hope they are, they've adapted the product to the way that people actually use it. I think that's smart.
Earl Wallace in our channel says, Steve Gibson says keep it in. And if Steve Gibson's saying let it plugged in and don't let it charge, he knows what he's talking about.
Yep, absolutely.
He knows. And he's all about the vitamin D and charging batteries. He is.
Yeah.
The next one is the internet. Where will the internet be in 10 years? And this is fascinating. We've discussed this on other shows. Either we're going to look back in 10 years from now, we're going to look back and say, wow, I can't believe you were able to do insert whatever. Or we're going to say, wow, I can't believe they regulated and they were so concerned with this. It's in this, we're still in the infancy of the internet. If you look at it, the internet as we know it currently has only existed for less than 20 years.
Right.
So this is fairly a new concept of the way that we function as a society with being connected to this thing called the internet, the World Wide Web. Will it change dramatically over the last 10 years? Has it changed in 10 years? I mean, go back to 2002. How different is it from 2002? It just looks a lot prettier, right?
Well, you know what? I actually think we're heading toward the notion of internet as infrastructure. It's not just prettier. It's also a lot more reliable and a lot faster across the board. I actually think that the future of the internet is that all of these things that are today on separate things, phone calls, cable or optical based delivery of video and TV shows, it's all going to happen over IP. I think that the internet becomes
what the phone is and what the electric line is.
The base infrastructure. I think the problem with that is that once the internet becomes that important to our everyday lives, the question is whether the government really regulates it.
They're going to have to. I mean, that's
like electricity. In other words, a basic standard of living would include a certain amount of money per year, electricity, water, and plumbing, and all that, and internet. Maybe.
You actually, I don't. It has nothing to do with it, but I found an old PC World magazine from like '97 in my attic, and we're talking about the main thing was the internet and where the future of the internet is, and we're talking about how the future of the internet is internet over power lines.
Yeah.
And I remember in the early 2000s, that we're really starting to develop these internet over power line type concepts, and it kind of fell apart.
Well, you know what's interesting about that is that stuff has actually gotten a lot better, but it's just never taken off. And I think that the power line internet access thing was always this notion of what we really want is for everyone to have wired internet, as we thought of it at the time, in their house. But most people are not going to put Cat 5 in their house or whatever. But everyone has power connections.
So you
in
just
their,
plug right in
house.
there.
So, let's add it to that. Actually, even though few people use it, that stuff's supposed to work really well. I don't have it here, but it's actually supposed to work really well. I like the notion of, new home construction. A lot of times you'll see upscale homes
Have like a Cat 5, yeah.
Yeah, that's part of it.
I've actually installed Cat 5 all over my house. Almost every bedroom has a Cat 5 line.
Yeah, no, I've done the same thing, but it's something you add after the fact, right?
Yeah.
What you're trying to do is reach people in a way that everyone can use it. So I think in the early days, before the advent of really good wireless internet, the notion of power line was how we were going to get there. But I think today everyone would agree that wireless is the way to go. And that even if, you had like LTE style 4G networking, that's awesome. And it doesn't require anything in your house. It's just there. It's out in the other,
Paul, unfortunately, you have to leave.
Yes, I do.
It's 6 o'clock, so we're going to wrap up the show. Go to our website, guysfromqueens.com. This was a lot of fun. We do a drinking show every couple months almost. I think like every 3 months we'll do a drinking show. It's fun.
I describe it as semi-annual.
Semi-annual, yeah. So if you're tuning in at the very end of the show and we're starting to slur, it's because we've been drinking for the last hour and a half.
Well, one of us has. I don't know about you.
I bit my tongue. I've been slurring before I started drinking. What does that say about me? WinSuperside.com, Paul Thurrott's website. Great website over there. A lot of great articles. He writes stuff. That's what he does. He writes smart things.
Jeez. Wow. That's
saying a lot. You could also subscribe to the show. Guys, subscribe to What the Tech. It's a great show. I'm on it. Paul is on it. And you're watching it. So subscribe. It helps us out. And we'll see you all next week on What the Tech. Good night, everybody.